Yeah, the next comment is about uh, what I would call morality, which is tied to the personal self, and which is a product of the social consciousness, and actually has little impact on the free being of light, of pure light that everyone is. Um, One of the areas that particularly turn the sin meal is sex. You know, so a man satisfies an urge that he maybe cannot control, and for the rest of his life he is hounded and haunted, forced to admit he is sinned in front of church ministers and the public, and the press uses his sexual escapades in every situation to blackmail. Politicians use it as political capital. Uh, all this is centered around the idea of sinning. Well, I'm not an apologist for Bill Clinton, but just want to bring to our attention how the idea of sin is so deep rooted in the individual and collective consciousness that it has completely shackled people, and it's also been used as a marketing tool. Uh, this is my idea. Uh, where there is no consciousness of sin, there is no sin. And acceptance of sin uh, is like a blight on the free being of pure light that you is, and conventional morality is like a witch hunt, in my opinion. So as I was pondering over this, I can see why Duane says that the birds, the fishes, the animals, insects, ants, bees live a wonderful life because there are no moral codes, no restrictions, no limitations. You see, and consequently, we don't have ideas like belief, faith, and hope, sinning, and all the like in their community. So, Dwayne, can you say something more on this?
You know, the so-called moral issue. Of course, I don't listen to the news anymore, realistically, because it really doesn't make sense. So, these moral issues, the idea of morals, I hardly hear it anymore. I think it's went through its phase, but again, some people will bring it up, the moral majority or whatever, these ideas. And then you get into the kind of the abrasive part of it, which is sin. Okay, so you got to throw that in there too. But I see the sin idea because it's more abrasive. It's more, pushes, you might say, makes the individual grovel more. But really, what it does is it also creates guilt, and that's the whole idea of it. So this is all psychological, is what it is. These ideas, they're really a psychological marketing to keep people uh, obeying, basically, to the system. Is really what it is. And so they will use these different ideas. And so to get through all this, to have a better understanding, again, it's a lot. We're oppressed by these things because we've accepted them too, unconsciously, consciously, and mainly unconsciously. We've went along, we've accepted these things. Now we're waking up and we see that, okay, where do these things fit with our experience? And so we decide, yeah. And there again is, the animals in nature, the birds, the animals, etc. call them creatures, but I don't call them creatures. Okay, uh, these are the big businesses of today. I would say the sharks, the land sharks, or those. These are the creatures that roam the earth because they're doing funny things. So, but again, each person is going to decide, and the moral aspect, I would say, one side of it is we learn these things, moral ethics, understanding. I use the word honor, okay, to simply being honorable, like a handshake and saying yes, I'll do that. But today it's contracts with lawyers and all these different things that supposedly this is going to keep the person honest and morally straight, or whatever the idea is with the transaction that's going on. This is the business world. This is how it is. So we play the game. So uh, each person is going to figure this out for themselves, Charles. But the biggest one, yes, is the sin idea, and that's to create guilt. That's very obvious. There's no two ways around it. So we've all, been subject to ourselves and the world, and so we make the choices to try and figure this out, to try and get through it. It's kind of like a person. I've known people that they take medications, and all of a sudden, without them thinking about it, they're thinking that, oh, the medications are a benefit, but after a while, they actually become addicted to the medications and aberrated because of them, and then it becomes a must to where they can no longer get the prescriptions, as an example, and so they will pay all kinds of money to get illegal, so-called illegal prescriptions. We'll just use that idea. So again, all of a sudden, unconsciously, the individual is subject to themselves. So, and we're subject to everything here, and the moral factor and the sin factor and all these things. It's how each person accepts this and identifies with it. So, yes, there's a lot to see and go through, and we've all been raised a particular way, and many of us by our parents, and many times the parents are into some kind of religion or belief or something. It's understandable because this is all they knew. It's just like when I was raised mainly by my mother. Yeah, she wasn't religious at all, etc. Fortunately, that I didn't have to go through that, but I did have to go to Sunday school when I was young, and I didn't like that at all. Eventually, I didn't have to go anymore. But again, these are the social things, like the moral idea. But the sin is a big one, and you'll see the TV evangelists, they like to use that all the time. That gets people's attention, doesn't it? Because they're afraid, and that is connected to guilt and fear. Fear is the big one. It's to get people around, just the average person that's okay, but to get them around to be afraid. That's the big controlling factor, and then they're open to more tap lines. Yeah, so this is very interesting where all this leads to. So yes, Charles, yes, you've got a lot to deal with, and you see Africa, it's a big place, one person at a time. Yes, and so this is where it takes a full amount of attention. That's where I've situated my life like I have, because you know what, the world is not waiting, and it's only has so much time. And this is my adventure. I take the risk to do it full time. Yeah. So yes, go ahead, Charles.
I have this one too. We always hear the words, God is in control. God is in control theory. And we know certain things. There is the inexorable law that rules the lower levels of life. And it is the law of karma. And it operates permissionless. However, we often hear people say God is seeing everything and will take care, and the perceived punishment, reward, suffering, alleviation of suffering, fortune, what they call blessings, they are all deemed to be God's response. So I begin to ask myself, where does the law of karma come in here? How does it fit into the events of life? because I see the gods of man as callous and careless of whatever happens to a man, in spite of their firm belief, firm and positive belief that life is being taken care of. Uh, their lives have been taken care of by God. And I have this classic narrative from Greek mythology. Yeah. Prometheus in this mythology has more love for God than the gods. And what does he do? He steals fire from heaven, from the gods, and brings down to earth uh, to alleviate man's suffering. So the gods get very angry at his magnanimity, and they punish him very severely. He is chained to a rock, and vultures have to eat his liver in little bits throughout the day. And the gods replace it by night so that his ordeal can continue by daylight. Uh, so here is the supposed love of God in action, uh, while people erroneously are being suffused by faith and belief that God is taking care of them, in spite of what is happening around them. So I would like to ask Duane if being in a position different from the religionist, like the new student, can the new student leave everything in the hands of the olives and the real guides, trusting that all is well and all will be taken care of? Duane?
Yeah, we'll go over this. It's fun. Again, the last sentence you made there, can we leave it all in with the is and the real guides and all will be taken care of? Well, uh, what is our position? We are to decide something. Okay, this is how it is. So, and it's accordance with what we decide. The isness is what it is, like the sun shining. That's like saying, well, I'll just let the sun, you know, figure out everything for me. Does that make sense? So the whole of life and the real guide, it's all the same thing. You have to decide something. I have to decide something. I have to decide what's going on, and then the boys will decide if they'll back me on it, you see? So I have to constantly decide. And I like this story here. This, you know, we're talking about the law of karma and all that stuff. And again, that's just cause and effect so that you can better see yourself and the actions you're taking and the decisions you're making within creation. And then eventually recognizing your intent and, you know, what will you decide with that? You must decide. You are the decider. But I like this story of the individual that you said, I didn't quite get the name, brings fire uh, to mankind from the heavens, and in a way that's true. Uh, it is so. In other words, the gods rule because again, they're like the prison warden. They've created the prison, and they're the warden of it. And so all of a sudden, you know, one of the guards decides to you know, bring a good meal or something beneficial or a razor or something to shave to one of the inmates, and the warden doesn't like that. It's kind of like one of the fellas that and you can go on YouTube and see this, that invented a car that runs on water. And there is a video of this fella, and there's many, but there's this one fella and I forget his name, but he was killed. And who killed him? Oh, that's a mystery. Okay, so it's almost like, well, no one killed him. He got killed though. So again, yes, we know who killed him, and that is, you might say, the gods, because they didn't want that to be known. In other words, the fire idea here that you're bringing along, and just like anything, certain things, those that are in control, they don't want the unaware masses to have any advantages, you see, because they are afraid themselves of a takeover. You see, just like the gods in their heavenly castles and their abodes, they fear, because this is why they promote fear, they fear the billions and trillions and almost endless individuals out there, because once they wake up, you see, they supersede anything that the so-called gods can decide. This is why individuals like this person, he was, tortured through his life, and I would say these are true stories. Okay, this becomes a truth. Remember, I asked you a truth. Well, these are the truths and they do this as a demonstration. They creates the fear factor. It's like, if you don't obey the gods, this is what's going to happen to you, and it's not good. So everybody's afraid, and they're just going to obey for the most part. They're going to have their little lives, but they're going to obey. So, this is where these historical events, whether true or not, become a very good reference to see, what has value, what doesn't, what is real, what isn't, etc. This is cause and effect creation to eventually figure all this out. And no spiritual path or religion or, cute sayings or ancient wisdom are going to do it for you. It's recognizing your real awareness and perceiving the isness with it. So again, events and circumstances take place here, and they become a comparison, a reference of comparison. But it just depends upon the individual. So many people will take this, and so they'll go along with the God idea. And it's like, well, gee, I don't want this to happen to me, so I'm going to fear God, and I'm going to go pray, on a daily basis or weekly or whatever. I'm going to go to Sunday school. I'm going to do all these things that supposedly God wants me to do. So again, it's choice, isn't it? Yes. And so the idea of just giving up everything, in other words, Paul talked about it as surrender. Well, I don't use that term, all right? I use recognition. Once you recognize what is real, you simply see that you don't need these other things. That's a type of surrender too, where you give these things up. But again, you're the decision maker. You decide how to see reality. You decide how you're going to recognize it. That's your decision. You're going to decide how to survive here in the physical terms. That's your decision. There is no one else deciding that for you. Just like the real guides, they've went through this process and they've decided their position. And so again, I'm just sharing the example of that. And for people, they decide how they're going to do it or figure it out. So again, through the process, we need to see what has no value, what doesn't work according to the true reality life is. We need that also. We need all these things to finally put it together to recognize the bigger picture. So in the meantime, there's all these things happening, aren't they? And so it just depends upon, I like how to compare things. You compare it, apples to oranges. Okay, well, I prefer oranges, you see, because it's not an apple, whatever. And the same is here. And we're giving people the example of that. They can compare us to, universal super beings, to, being a member of the corporation or any other thing. We're giving them that comparison, but they're deciding. They are the deciders. Yes. Go, Charles, go. Thank you.
The character you were asking about, the person who stole the fire from the gods, is called Prometheus. Prometheus.
That's what I thought you said. I wasn't quite sure. Prometheus. Yes, I've heard of him
Yeah.
before. Yes. Yes. Didn't he work for the government for a while?
No, it's Greek mythology, Greek mythology, and you really put it in perspective, brought in the um, the fear of God that is supposed to rule those who believe in God. God has to exact this. exemplary punishments to keep everyone in line. You see, the analogy is very clear to me. Yeah, very clear. And you see, that is why people have to fear God, fear the wrath of God, and do everything to be uh, obedient, to be good, whatever, maybe Christians or something like that. You know.
Real fast here, Charles. I'm just going to guess, but maybe he's learned his lesson and he's come around through lifetimes, and now he's probably a server at a McDonald's drive-through and giving people hamburger and fries, and so he's complying with God after all that torture. It's like, okay, God, I'll serve the public GMO food. Are you happy with that? Something like that, because that's the modern day stuff, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, we all go through our cycle, don't we? Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. This is one of the questions. It's about the East. Uh, the East, I think, is a permanency. Uh, I'd rather the East is not a permanency, but it's in a constant state of flux. And this state of flux continually is. And I think anything to the contrary will make it a fossil. So then what can one do to continuously abide in the East?
Okay, that again, that's a decision. You're the decider. And actually, no, there's no flux and there's no fluctuation. There's none of the things that we identify with. Anything that you identify with, no, that's not it. It's, you might say, the closest thing is what I've said here before is there are no absolutes here. And there are not, because there's always change. There's cause and effect. There cannot be absolutes in creation. This is where people say, well, God is the absolute all knowing. They cannot be so, because creation is the effect, you might say, of the isness. And the isness is endless, all right? And so there's no fluctuations with the isness. There's no fluctuations. But you might say that it is an endless absolute, okay, without end. That's what it is. And so, yeah, no, you're thinking in terms of creation, like ebb and flow with the stream or the water, or high and low tide, or whatever, the sun rising and setting. Again, we're seeing cause and effect, which is necessary. It's all very necessary. Like I said, everything is fine, but to see this and again perceive. It's not about any fluctuation. It's an isness, and it is to be perceived. And from that, it's everything that is unseen. And you decide what to bring into creatively the seen part according to the five bodies, you see. But the real awareness sees it all. So again, trying to incorporate or trying to utilize ideas. What I've said before is that there's nothing you can add to life that's going to make it better. This is what is being done here with the natural environment. People are adding things to it. Is it making it better? No, it's making it worse. And so as you try to add ideas to the isness, it's not that you make it worse, it's just that you confuse yourself. Okay. Yes, and Confucius talked about these things, and this is how he confused himself too, with just about everything he said. Okay, so uh, yeah, it's not that at all. You have to see it You know, what's interesting, I'm going to bring this up. That letter that Sandy wrote, Siebling, did I pronounce that right? Anyhow, the one that I put out there, 50 Years of Eckankar. You know, it's interesting how the it was told to her. She did that letter very well. And in that one part, it said, there's a different master now. Okay. So this becomes very interesting. Just use that term. All right. And I was shown a lot of years ago. All right. And it's interesting. A lot of times the vehicles that are used on the real side are Dodges. And the advertisement for Dodge was Dodge is different. You see. So again, that's kind of a reference to myself being here. See, they could have used any word at all. Could have used this or that, or there's another master or whatever. But they used the word different. She wrote that down. So again, what I'm saying here is that you learn to see this reality different than what you've seen things before. And this becomes, in its own way, an indifference to what you've known. You see? Yeah, so how is it that you're going to see this reality different from what you've seen or understood things up to this point? But that's a decision. See, you have to decide. Now, we're constantly being shown, okay, constantly, because this is what life is. Life is totally exposing itself to us all the time. But it is up to us to take the time, you might say, to recognize this, how we approach it, you might say, etc. It's up to us. We are the deciders. And you see, we have been conditioned with the idea that others are to decide for us, like the government and the religions and all these, and the masters and gurus and all these things, your teacher, your parents are to decide for you because we were raised for that, raised that way, and that they are the authorities, and that you need someone else, you need someone to confirm you and all these things. That's what, going back to the baptism, you need someone else to confirm you. You see, realistically, you don't. Does the sun need confirmed to be confirmed by what? Is it confirmed by anything else? Does the moon confirm the sun? No, there's no confirmation of anything there. And so as we go through this process, it becomes so. So again, yes, there is that indifference there to recognize and then eventually perceive. So you go through the process, and little by little you bring it in to this position here. But trying to use something that's in creation accordingly, it can only be a hint or a reference. It cannot be a reality. And this is where the difference lies, making things here a reality that really do not relate to the whole of life. They are real in their own sense. In other words, a rock is a rock. It's a rock, and you can think anything else, but it's really just a rock. And this is to be here. This is how it is. This is what we need to eventually, recognize that life isn't a rock, and a rock is just an idea. So, this becomes the adventure, Charles. This becomes the great adventure. This becomes the real great adventure of this recognition. And it becomes eventually where you recognize it, the true heart of yourself, which is your intent, your being, your real awareness with this isness standing real with it. So again, you must decide all the way. Each person must decide. And this is for people to learn, you might, how to save themselves from all this effect and all this grief and nonsense that they go through. They must take the time to recognize this, and you decide how you're going to present it. So again, people are looking for the old cliches. They want something to relate to. And this is what I realized too, all the years that I was out there in the public giving introductory lectures when I was with the corporation. I saw that many people that came to the lectures and to hear what I had to say, They just wanted a confirmation of what they already knew. And that was it. And many people, that's all they want. And so you let them be, but you do your part, you do your adventure, etc. But this is how the world is. That's a wake up too, to recognize that. We're not here to market people or to convince them. That's not the idea. We're here to share. We're here to present. Again, the new presentation. That's all it is. We are simply the presenters, like the sun shining. That's it. And so again, we don't decide. And so we don't encourage deciding for others, or that life or the guides decide for others. I don't encourage that. I don't specify that. It's the individual. Every moment they make the decision. They decide to see or not. They decide to do whatever, you see? So this is where we are. Yes, sir. So with that, why don't we wrap it up? Because we're at 2 hours. It's long enough. We don't have to drag it out too far. And, you're wonderful. You got to figure out these questions and bringing this stuff up. But it's very, very good, Charles, because there's so much to sort out in this world. And little by little, people are getting the understanding from this. There are those. And so, again, you might say the world will change when people decide to change their consciousness. In other words, transfer, or, have a better translation of what they've already experienced, instead of just holding on to the old stuff. So, like the old saying, a captain goes down with the ship. Well, guess what? That's a cute old saying, but if you're the captain of the boat and all of a sudden the ship's going down, do you really want to go down with the ship? Or do you want to jump in the water and possibly swim to the shore? It's a decision. But if you go with the old cliche, then you're going down with the ship and you're going to have to deal with it. So, and even into future lifetimes, all the phobias that you're going to be gaining from just that experience. So again, we decide every moment, don't we? Yes. Yes, thank you, Charles.